Today's scripture lesson is from the book of Ruth. Please join me as we learn about the incredible story of Ruth and Naomi. There once was a woman named Naomi who married a man named Elimelech, and they had 2 sons. Naomi and her family lived in the town of Bethlehem in the land of Judah. After they had lived there for a while, there was a famine in the land, and they had no food to eat, so they decided to move to the country of Moab. Moab was across the Dead Sea from Judah, and the people living in Moab, the Moabites, were descendants of Lot, who was the nephew of Abraham, but they were not considered to be part of the people of God. While they were living in Moab, Naomi's sons married Moabite women. One of them was named Orpah, and the other was named Ruth. Unfortunately, when they were in Moab, Naomi's husband died along with both of their sons, leaving Naomi, Orpah, and Ruth as widows. And Naomi decided that it would be best for her to move back to Bethlehem in Judah, where she had family. But she thought that it would be best if her daughter-in-laws did not come with her. She told them to return to their homes and their families where they could get remarried, and they could have husbands that would provide them care and protection that she didn't have the ability to provide for them. So she told them this, and Orpah decided to go home so she could get remarried and be cared for by her family and a husband in a way that Naomi just couldn't. But Ruth said no. She refused to leave Naomi, and Naomi continued to try and convince her, saying to her, "See, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law." But Ruth continued to refuse Naomi, and she said to her, "Do not press me to leave you or to turn back from following you. Where you go, I will go. Where you live, I will live. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God." Ruth didn't want to go home. She didn't want to take the easy route where she would be guaranteed protection of a husband and family. She wanted to be Naomi's family, like Naomi had been her family before, and she loved Naomi so much that she was willing to go to this foreign land that didn't even worship the same God as she did, in order to stay with her new family in Naomi. So Naomi and Ruth went back to Bethlehem, and in order to gain food for themselves, Ruth went to work in a field, and she gleaned barley that hadn't been taken in the harvest. And the owner of the field, a man named Boazz, who was a relative of Naomi, saw her and asked a servant, "Who is that woman?" And the servant told him all about Ruth, and when he learned about Ruth and how she had taken care of Naomi and how much she loved Naomi, Boaz decided to be kind to Ruth. When Naomi heard about Boaz's kindness and remembered that he was a relative, she told Ruth that she should marry him. So Ruth went to Boaz and asked him to marry her, but Boaz couldn't because he wasn't the next of kin to her late husband. You see, in this time, it was a man's next of kin's responsibility to take on that man's property and take care of his wife once he had died. But Boaz wasn't the next of kin. There was a man ahead of him in line for the inheritance. But Boaz told Ruth that he would go to the next of kin and ask if he was willing to take care of Ruth and Naomi and take on the inheritance of Ruth's husband. So he did this. He went to the man and he told him all about what had happened to Naomi's husbands and sons and about the land that he would be acquiring if he took the inheritance. But when the man learned that this inheritance also came with Ruth, a Moabite woman, he declined. And he gave the right to marry Ruth to Boaz along with the inheritance. And Boaz was so happy because he did want to marry Ruth. He wanted to provide her protection and care for her and Naomi, and he went and told Ruth, and soon after they got married, and they had a son named Obed. And when Obed grew old, he had a son named Jesse, who grew up to have a bunch of sons, the youngest of whom is named David, who you might recognize as King David of Israel, the grandson of Ruth, and the great-grandson of Naomi.